The hum of the highway had a peculiar way of both lulling and invigorating me, a steady drone against the backdrop of an adventure just beginning. Liam, beside me, was humming along to some indie folk track filtering through the car speakers, his left hand casually tapping the rhythm on the steering wheel. Sunlight, dappled and warm, sliced through the windshield, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and Liam's ever present smile, a sight that always managed to settle something restless inside me. "Sure you packed enough bug spray, Mr. Nature Hater?" he teased, without taking his eyes off the winding road. I snorted, leaning my head against the cool glass of the passenger window. "Please, you know I approach the wilderness with the respectful caution it deserves. It's not hate, it's self-preservation. And yes, I double-checked the industrial strength repellent, enough to gas a small army of mosquitoes." He chuckled, a rich, full sound that made the stale air in the car feel a little lighter. "Good. Wouldn't want you retreating to the tent at the first sign of an itchy bite? Now, would we?" This yearly camping trip was our ritual, a self-imposed exile from the city's relentless pace, a detox from screens and deadlines. For a decade now, since university, we'd picked a new spot each summer or revisited an old favorite to spend a long weekend under the stars. It started as a way to blow off steam, an excuse to drink cheap beer by a campfire, and complain about exams. Over the years, it evolved, deepening with the unspoken complexities of our friendship. Liam and I were an odd pair, on paper. He, the effortlessly charming, outgoing marketing guru; me, the quietly observant architect, more comfortable sketching lines than navigating social ones. But our differences somehow complemented each other. He pulled me out of my shell. I perhaps offered him a grounding presence. What had always been clear, at least to me, was an undeniable current that ran beneath the surface of our friendship, an electric hum I often tried to ignore, especially when his arm brushed mine, or when his gaze lingered a beat too long. Today, that current felt particularly strong. Maybe it was the anticipation of 2 days spent in close proximity, far from the distractions of our separate lives. Or maybe it was just the way the light hit his profile, accentuating the sharp line of his chin and the slight curl of his dark hair. Whatever it was, a familiar knot tightened in my stomach, a mixture of excitement and a potent, almost fearful longing. "Think we'll get to see the Perseids tonight?" I asked, trying to steer my thoughts away from the dangerous territory of Liam's attractiveness and toward something safer, like celestial mechanics. He hummed thoughtfully. "Forecast said clear skies. If we're lucky, yeah. Be a good show out here, away from all the light pollution." He glanced over at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Remember that time we thought we saw a UFO in Oregon? You almost dropped the s'mores." A genuine laugh escaped me then, the memory vivid. "It was glowing, Liam, and silent. For all we knew, it was an alien reconnaissance craft." "It was a drone, Caleb. A very large, very slow drone." He rolled his eyes playfully, but his smile never faltered. "Still, your face was priceless. Total, wide-eyed panic." We fell into a comfortable silence after that, punctuated only by the music and the occasional crunch of gravel as Liam navigated a particularly bumpy stretch of road. The city receded in the rearview mirror, replaced by rolling hills that gradually gave way to towering pines. The air grew cooler, crisper, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. It was a smell that always signaled the transition, the shedding of urban anxieties, the invitation to something simpler, more elemental. My mind, however, was anything but simple. It churned with a million questions, anxieties, and desires, all centered around the man in the driver's seat. Had Liam ever noticed the way my breath hitched when he leaned in too close to show me something on his phone? Or the way my eyes involuntarily tracked him when he moved around a room? Was it just my own wishful thinking, projecting meaning onto innocent gestures? Or was there, just maybe, a reciprocal pull? I'd never dared to ask, never dared to test the waters, terrified of shattering the comfortable, precious structure of our friendship. This camping trip, with its forced intimacy and isolation, felt like a crucible. As we veered off the main road onto a narrow, unpaved track, the trees closed in around us, forming a verdant tunnel. The car bounced and swayed, kicking up a plume of dust behind us. "Almost there," Liam announced, his voice imbued with the excitement of a kid on a treasure hunt. The chosen campsite was one we'd booked months in advance, a secluded spot beside a small, clear lake, ringed by ancient firs. It was perfect. As soon as Liam cut the engine, the silence descended, profound and enveloping, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of a bird. The air, crisp and cool, filled my lungs, chasing away the last vestiges of city smog. "All right, Operation Camp Setup is a go," Liam declared, already flinging open his door and stretching, his muscles rippling beneath his t-shirt. I watched him, a familiar warmth spreading through my chest. He was built lean and strong, with an athletic grace that made even mundane tasks like unloading gear look effortless. We worked in tandem, a practiced choreography born of years of shared labor. Liam retrieved the tent poles and fabric from the trunk while I hauled out the cooler and the duffel bags. The tent, a sturdy two-person dome, practically assembled itself under our combined efforts. He held the poles while I threaded the fabric. I staked down the corners while he secured the fly. Our hands brushed occasionally, brief, innocent contacts that sent tiny electric jolts through me, though I tried to appear unfazed. "Perfect," Liam said, stepping back to admire our hand-eye work, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "Our humble abode for the next 2 nights." He flashed me that smile again, and for a fleeting moment I felt a giddy lightness, a sudden urge to just reach out and touch his cheek. I quickly shoved my hands into my pockets. Inside the tent, we laid out our sleeping bags side by side, leaving a narrow strip of floor between them. It was a cozy arrangement, necessitated by the tent's size, but one that always made my heart beat a little faster. The thin nylon wall felt like a flimsy barrier, amplifying every sound, every movement. I carefully unrolled my sleeping bag, fluffing it up, acutely aware of the space he was occupying just inches away. "Think I'll go gather some firewood while you get the water boiled for coffee," Liam suggested, already grabbing the axe. "Sounds good," I managed, my voice a little rougher than I intended. He gave me a quick nod and disappeared into the trees, the rhythmic thud of the axe soon echoing through the woods. Alone, I busied myself with setting up the small camp stove and filling the kettle from the jug. The task, simple as it was, provided a welcome distraction, allowing me to rein in the runaway thoughts threatening to overwhelm me. The beauty of the place was undeniable. The way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor, the gentle murmur of the lake, the clean, earthy smell. It was precisely why we came here, to reconnect with something primal, something real. And yet, all I could focus on was the impending night, the dark, and the man who would be sleeping so close to me. When Liam returned, arms laden with logs, he looked like a figure out of a magazine, a rugged outdoorsman, his face flushed with exertion. A few stray leaves clinging to his hair. My breath caught, just for a second. "Got a good haul," he announced, dropping the wood with a satisfying thud near the designated fire pit. "Should be enough to keep us warm and toasty." "Great," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the sudden heat rising in my own cheeks. "Coffee's almost ready." We spent the rest of the afternoon in companionable silence, interspersed with easy conversation. We drank our coffee, brewed strong and black, and snacked on granola bars. Liam showed me a few photos from his latest work trip, and I recounted a particularly frustrating client meeting. It was the rhythm of our friendship, comfortable and familiar, yet with that underlying hum I couldn't shake. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we set about preparing dinner. Liam, ever the grill master, took charge of the hot dogs, skewering them over the open flames of the fire he'd skillfully built. I prepped the buns and chopped some onions for a makeshift relish. The smell of wood smoke mingled with cooking meat, a quintessential camping aroma that always brought a sense of nostalgic comfort. We ate, sitting on a log by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on our faces. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky deepened to an inky blue, studded with the first shy stars. The air grew colder, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. "This is the life, isn't it?" Liam said, taking a sip from his beer can, his gaze fixed on the mesmerizing dance of the flames. "It really is," I agreed, meaning it more profoundly than he probably knew. Here, stripped of all pretenses and distractions, with him beside me, felt like the most real version of myself. And it was terrifying. Our conversation drifted, as it often did on these trips, from superficial chatter to deeper reflections. We talked about our hopes for the future, the anxieties that kept us up at night, the dreams we still chased. Liam spoke of wanting to travel more, to see the world beyond corporate boardrooms. I confessed my lingering doubts about my career path, the desire to create something truly meaningful, not just aesthetically pleasing. It was a space of vulnerability we rarely accessed in the city, surrounded by the constant hum of obligations. "You know, you're good at this, Caleb," Liam said suddenly, turning to face me fully, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "Good at what?" I asked, feeling my heart give a little flutter. "This, connecting, seeing past the surface. You listen, really listen." He paused, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "It's why I always look forward to these trips. You make me think differently, see things from a different angle." My throat felt tight. Compliments from Liam were rare, especially ones that delved into anything beyond superficial praise. "You do the same for me?" I managed, my voice a little hoarse. "You pull me out, make me try things I wouldn't otherwise." He smiled thin and a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good. We balance each other out." The air thrummed with unspoken things, a silent acknowledgement of the depth of our bond. I wanted to say more, to push the boundaries, to ask if he felt the same electric charge that coursed through me every time he looked at me like that. But fear, an old, familiar friend, held my tongue. The risk was too great. We stayed by the fire until late, watching the stars emerge, more and more numerous, a shimmering blanket across the vast canvas of the night sky. The temperature dropped significantly, and we pulled our chairs closer to the dying embers, savoring the last vestiges of warmth. The talk eventually dwindled to comfortable silence, the kind that only close friends, or something more, can share. Finally, a shiver ran through me, signaling it was time to retreat. "All right, I think my fingers are officially numb," I announced, standing up and stretching my stiff limbs. Liam groaned dramatically. "Yeah, my internal thermostat just hit critical. Time to hibernate." We doused the fire carefully, making sure every ember was extinguished, then stumbled toward the tent, guided by the moonlight. Inside, the air was still and cool, carrying the faint scent of nylon and our own lingering body heat. I unzipped my duffel bag and pulled out my sleep clothes, a comfortable old t-shirt. I paused, considering. It was surprisingly warm in the sleeping bag, and the night air was growing a little humid. Plus, I'd been feeling a bit constricted all day. A sudden impulse, born of comfort, and perhaps a small, private rebellion against the formality of clothes in the wilderness, struck me. I often slept commando at home, relishing the freedom. Why not here? It felt like a small act of reclaiming personal space, even if that space was shared. Liam, meanwhile, was already shrugging off his t-shirt, revealing a glimpse of his toned torso in the dim light filtering through the tent fabric. He turned his back to me as he pulled on some loose sweatpants, and I quickly averted my gaze, my cheeks flushing. It was a casual intimacy, a naturalness that bespoke years of shared changing rooms at the gym or quick costume changes for plays back in high school. But tonight, it felt different, charged. I waited until he was settled into his sleeping bag, his back to me, before I made my move. I quickly peeled off my jeans, then hesitated over my boxers. No, I decided. The air inside the tent was stuffy, and the sleeping bag itself was warm. I wanted to feel truly free, unencumbered. A small, almost imperceptible thrill shot through me. It felt illicit, exposed, even though I was completely cocooned within my own sleeping bag, out of sight. A secret. I slid into my sleeping bag, pulling the zipper up to my chin. The material was soft against my bare skin, a surprising comfort. The cold air around my waist quickly warmed, creating a cozy cocoon. I adjusted my small pillow, trying to get comfortable, acutely aware of Liam's breathing, steady and even, beside me. The faint scent of wood smoke still clung to his clothes, a primal, masculine smell that somehow intensified the moment. The sounds of the night pressed in, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, the chirping of crickets. The lake water lapped softly, a rhythmic lullaby. It was a symphony of nature, and usually it brought me profound peace. Tonight, however, my mind was too active. I lay there for a long time, staring up at the curved ceiling of the tent, my thoughts a kaleidoscope of the day's events. Liam's easy smile, the warmth of his hand brushing mine, his sincere compliment by the fire, the casual intimacy of changing clothes. Each memory was a brushstroke, adding to a portrait of a longing I could no longer deny. My heart ached with the tenderness of it all and a gnawing fear that it was all in my head, a fantasy spun from years of unrequited affection. My body, free of the usual constraints, felt hyper-aware. My skin tingled, responsive to every subtle shift in the air, every rustle of the sleeping bag. It was a strange blend of vulnerability and exhilaration. Being so close to Liam, yet so utterly exposed beneath the layers of fabric, felt like a metaphor for my entire relationship with him. All my deepest desires and fears, hidden beneath a carefully constructed facade of platonic friendship. I imagined him, just inches away, equally vulnerable in his own sleeping bag. Did he ever lie awake like this? His mind racing with similar thoughts? Or was I just a convenient, dependable friend, a familiar anchor in his life? The thought sent a pang of disappointment through me. But then there was the way he'd looked at me by the fire, the genuine warmth in his eyes, the sincere appreciation in his voice. Maybe there was something more. Maybe. Sleep finally began to claim me, a heavy blanket pulling me down into unconsciousness. My last conscious thought was a quiet yearning, a whispered hope for something more profound, something that might finally bridge the small physical gap between our sleeping bags. I drifted off, a tangle of nerves and anticipation, into the deep, dark wilderness of dreams, completely unaware of what the morning light might reveal, or whose touch might greet me. The quiet, almost sensual freedom of sleeping without barriers was a secret I took into the night, a silent prayer for connection. I woke up slowly, the way you do when you're somewhere unfamiliar but safe, not with a jolt, but a gentle unfurling like a sleepy flower. The air in the tent was cool, crisp, smelling faintly of pine and the damp earth outside. I could hear the faint chirping of birds, the earliest risers, and the distant murmur of the small stream we'd camped near. For a second, everything felt perfectly normal, exactly what I'd expected from a weekend getaway in the mountains with my best friend, Ben. Then I felt it. A weight, a warmth, something that wasn't my own leg, wasn't the sleeping bag, wasn't the ground. It was soft, firm, and undeniably human. And it was resting squarely on my upper thigh, just above the knee. My eyes snapped open, though I kept my body still, my breath shallow. The tent was still dim, the pre-dawn light barely piercing the fabric, but I could make out Ben's form beside me. He was curled on his side, facing me, his head slightly tilted, dark hair falling across his forehead. He was deep asleep, a quiet, peaceful rhythm of breath filling the small space. And his hand, his actual warm hand, was on my leg. My mind, usually so quick to jump to conclusions or analyze, just blanked. It was like a sudden, unexpected power outage. No thoughts, no words, just a pure, visceral sensation. The warmth seeped into my skin, right there, where I had absolutely no barrier. Because, of course, I hadn't worn boxers. Stupid, stupid Caleb, or was it? A jolt went through me, but I didn't move. My heart, usually a steady drum, started to do a frantic little jig against my ribs. What was happening? How long had it been there? Was he dreaming? Was he just cold and reaching for warmth without thinking? This was Ben, after all. My Ben. The guy I'd known since college, who I'd shared countless laughs and stupid adventures with. He was affectionate, sure, but never... This. Not like this. I stared at his hand, then up at his face. He looked so utterly innocent, utterly oblivious. His eyelashes were long, fanning out against his cheek, and a small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. My gaze drifted back to his hand. His fingers were slightly splayed, his palm resting flat, radiating a heat that felt both comforting and intensely unsettling. It wasn't a grab, not a squeeze, just a resting, an accidental intimate connection. A million thoughts started to cascade then, like stones down a steep incline. First, panic. What if he woke up? What would I do? Pretend I hadn't noticed? But how could you not notice that? The second wave was pure, unadulterated curiosity. Why? And then a flush, hot and sudden, spread through me. It wasn't just panic, it was something else. Something I hadn't let myself name in years, not around Ben. A spark, a possibility, a longing that had been buried so deep I thought it had fossilized. I lay there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes. Every nerve ending in my leg was hyper-aware of that touch. It wasn't just skin on skin, it felt like a connection, like a tiny electric current passing between us. My leg, usually just a leg, suddenly felt like the most sensitive part of my body, acutely aware of its exposed state, of the soft fabric of the sleeping bag against my other leg, of the sudden, almost dizzying intimacy of the moment. The sun started to peek through the trees, casting faint, shifting shadows on the tent walls. The birds outside grew louder, more insistent. Reality was slowly, inexorably seeping back in. He was going to wake up soon. What then? Do I move his hand? Do I pretend I'm still asleep? Do I enjoy it for another moment? The last thought, shameful and exhilarating, made my breath hitch. I realized I was holding my breath. Slowly, carefully, I exhaled. My heart was still hammering, but a strange calm had begun to settle over the chaos. It was almost peaceful, this unexpected intimacy, like being caught in a bubble where the world outside faded and only the two of us, and that silent, potent touch existed. Then Ben stirred. A small sigh escaped his lips. His head shifted on the makeshift pillow. My entire body tensed, preparing for impact, for the moment he'd open his eyes and see, or, worse, feel. His fingers, ever so slightly, curled. Not a conscious movement, but a settling, a deepening of the contact. My breath caught again. Oh God! His eyes fluttered open. For a second, they were unfocused, sleepy, scanning the dim interior of the tent. They landed on my face. He blinked once, twice. A slow smile spread across his lips, the kind of easy, genuine smile he always gave in the morning, a little rumpled and completely charming. "Morning, sleepyhead," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. And then his gaze drifted downwards, down to his hand, on my leg. His smile faltered. His eyes widened, just a fraction, a flash of something. Surprise? Confusion? Crossed his face. And then, as if jolted by an electric shock, he snatched his hand back. It happened so fast I almost didn't register it. One moment, the warmth was there. The next, a sudden, startling coldness where his hand had been. The space felt empty, hollow. He pushed himself up, rubbing the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. A slight flush crept up his neck, darkening his cheeks. "Oh, man, sorry," he mumbled, his voice suddenly a few octaves higher, a little breathless. He cleared his throat. Didn't realize I must have been reaching for my sleeping bag or something. Force of habit. His explanation was quick, almost too quick. It sounded rehearsed, or at least something he was desperately trying to convince himself of. I just stared at him, my mind scrambling for a response that sounded nonchalant, normal, anything to diffuse the sudden, suffocating awkwardness. My mouth felt dry. No worries, I managed, my voice a little rougher than I intended. I immediately regretted it. It sounded forced, stiff. Totally fine, just woke up myself. A lie. I'd been awake for ages, dissecting every micro movement, every breath. He still wouldn't meet my gaze directly. He was fumbling with his sleeping bag zipper, unnecessarily tightening it, then loosening it again. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, in the small tent. It wasn't the comfortable silence we usually shared. It was fraught, vibrating with unspoken things. Did you sleep okay? He asked, finally looking at me, but only for a second, before his eyes darted away to the tent ceiling. Yeah, great, I lied again. I'd barely slept a wink after that initial realization. The air mattress is surprisingly comfortable. You? Good, yeah, he said, nodding vigorously, still not making eye contact. Real good. Didn't even hear the coyotes last night. He was talking fast, filling the space. It was so unlike Ben, who was usually so calm, so grounded. This nervous energy was new, and it made my stomach clench. He was clearly as uncomfortable as I was, maybe even more so, which, I realized with a fresh wave of heat, meant he knew. He knew his hand was on my leg. He knew I was naked underneath. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't an accident. Or at least, the implications weren't lost on him. My mind raced. How do you recover from this? Do we just pretend it never happened? Go straight into making coffee and packing up? That felt impossible. The air was thick with the residue of that touch, the unspoken questions hanging like mist between us. So, I began, then immediately regretted the generic opener. What was I even going to say? Coffee soon? Ben jumped at the sound of my voice. Oh yeah, absolutely. My mouth feels like a desert. He practically dove for his duffel bag, pulling out his camp clothes. I'm gonna go splash some water on my face. Be right back. He scrambled out of the tent with an almost comical urgency, leaving me alone in the sudden quiet. I lay back, staring up at the tent ceiling. My hand instinctively went to my thigh, tracing the spot where his hand had been. It still felt warm, phantom warmth, like an imprint. My mind replayed the scene, his sleepy smile, his hand, his sudden withdrawal, his flustered explanation. It was all so vivid, so raw. Was I reading too much into it? Probably. I always did when it came to things like this, things that hinted at something deeper, something beyond friendship with someone I cared about. Especially with Ben. He was straight, or at least I'd always assumed he was. We'd talked about girls, about ex-girlfriends, about relationships, never once hinting at anything else. He was my rock, my platonic soulmate, the person I could tell anything to. And the idea of anything changing between us, of potentially ruining that, was terrifying. But that spark, that tiny, undeniable flicker of something else, it was still there, buzzing under my skin. I sighed, finally pulling myself out of the sleeping bag. The air was genuinely chilly now that the sun was starting to really assert itself. I pulled on my own shorts and a t-shirt, shivering slightly. My body felt acutely aware of every sensation, every temperature change. I felt exposed, even with clothes on. The memory of Ben's hand, the soft touch against my bare skin, lingered like a scent. When Ben came back, a few minutes later, he looked slightly more composed, his face damp from the stream water, his hair slicked back. He still didn't quite meet my eyes, though, which was so unlike him. Usually, he'd be cracking jokes, complaining about the cold water, generally being his boisterous self. Now he was quiet, almost subdued. Right, he said, heading for the cooler. Coffee first, then breakfast. You want eggs or just granola? Eggs if you're making them, I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. Anything to warm up. We fell into a comfortable, familiar routine, but the undercurrent of awkwardness was undeniable. We set up the portable stove, boiled water, brewed the coffee. Ben cracked eggs into a pan, his movements precise, focused. I chopped some leftover onions and peppers, my hands feeling clumsy, my mind still replaying the morning's events. Every time our eyes met, even accidentally, there was a fleeting moment of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the elephant in the tent. A quick glance, then away, a blush, suppressed. It was exhausting. "So," Ben said, breaking a longer silence than usual as he flipped an egg, "you got any plans for when we get back to the city?" I blinked, pulling myself back from my thoughts. Not really. Just back to the grind, I guess. Got a new project, kicking off at work." "Oh yeah? The one with the international client?" "That's the one," I nodded, grateful for the distraction, however temporary. We talked about work, about our mutual friends, about the upcoming football season. It was all superficial, easy, meant to fill the void and avoid the real issue. But even as we talked, I couldn't help but notice the way the morning sun caught the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the strong line of his mouth as he concentrated on the frying eggs, the way his t-shirt stretched slightly across his shoulders. Details I'd always noticed, but now they carried a different weight, a new resonance. As we ate our eggs, perched on makeshift log seats overlooking the shimmering lake, the beauty of the place almost felt mocking. How could something so idyllic feel so tense? "It's really gorgeous out here, isn't it?" Ben said, finally breaking the conversational barrier that wasn't work or sports related. He gestured expansively at the view. "Yeah, it really is," I agreed, genuinely. The morning mist was burning off, revealing the vibrant greens of the trees, the deep blue of the sky reflected in the water. "Always forget how much I love coming out here until I'm actually here." "Me too," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. He looked at me then, truly looked, and for a split second the old Ben was back, the one who saw right through my pretenses. "You seem a bit quiet this morning, though. Everything all right?" My heart skipped. This was it. The opening. The chance to address it, or to dodge it completely. I hesitated. "Just a bit tired, I guess," I said, opting for the dodge. It felt cowardly, but also safe. I wasn't ready to open that Pandora's box, not yet, maybe not ever. Ben's brow furrowed, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Disappointment? Understanding? "Right," he said slowly. He didn't push it, and I was both relieved and, surprisingly, a little disappointed. A part of me, the braver, more foolish part, wanted him to press, to ask, to make me talk about it. We spent the rest of the morning breaking down camp. We packed up the tent, rolled the sleeping bags, stowed the cooler. It was a methodical process, something we'd done countless times together. But today, every movement felt charged. When our hands brushed reaching for the same tent pole, a jolt went through me, and I pulled back almost immediately, mumbling an apology. Ben did the same, a similar quick withdrawal. It was a silent, awkward dance, this avoidance of touch, after the intimacy of the morning. We loaded the car, securing everything down. The sun was high now, warming the air, chasing away the morning chill. The stream gurgled beside us, its sound a constant, peaceful counterpoint to the turmoil in my head. "You want to do that hike we talked about before we head back?" Ben asked as we stood by the car, the last of the gear stowed. He leaned against the fender, arms crossed, trying to look casual. The hike, a beautiful, challenging trail that wound up to a lookout point with panoramic views. We'd planned it for today, the highlight of the trip, before we'd drive back to the city. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes, though still holding a trace of that morning's fluster, were genuinely hopeful. He wanted to go. And honestly, so did I. Anything to stretch out the time, to avoid going back to our separate lives, to avoid letting this awkwardness settle into a permanent fixture between us. Plus, a long hike would be a good way to work off some of this nervous energy. "Yeah," I said, a genuine smile, finally breaking through my own carefully constructed composure. Let's do it. I could use the fresh air. He visibly relaxed, a small smile lighting up his face. Great. I'll grab the water bottles and some snacks. The hike was both a blessing and a torment. The scenery was breathtaking. We walked through old-growth forests, sunlight dappling through the canopy, the scent of pine and damp earth filling our lungs. We climbed steep, rocky paths, our muscles protesting, our breath coming in ragged gasps. For a while, the physical exertion was a welcome distraction. We talked about the trail, about the different types of trees, about a squirrel that brazenly stole a nut right from our path. It was normal, almost. But every now and then, a silence would fall. And in those silences, my mind would drift back to the tent, to that hand, to the impossible questions. I'd glance at Ben, walking slightly ahead of me, his strong stride, the way his backpack settled on his shoulders, the easy grace of his movements. He seemed so utterly at ease in nature, so effortlessly himself. Did he feel anything? Anything at all beyond the accidental touch? Or was it truly just an unconscious reflex, a sleepy reaching for warmth? My rational mind screamed the latter. My hopeful, foolish heart whispered otherwise. We reached the summit. The view was spectacular, sweeping vistas of rolling hills, dense forests, and the sparkling lake below. We sat on a large rock, pulling out our water bottles and the granola bars Ben had packed. The wind whipped around us, cooling our sweaty skin. Wow, I breathed, genuinely awestruck. Every time, it just gets me. Told you, Ben grinned, taking a long swig of water. Worth the climb, right? Definitely. We sat in companionable silence for a while, just taking in the view. It was a comfortable silence, the kind we usually shared, born of mutual respect and long-standing friendship. But even here, high above the world, the morning's encounter lingered, a subtle hum beneath the surface of everything. You know, Ben said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the wind. He was staring out at the horizon, his profile etched against the bright sky. I feel bad about this morning. My breath hitched. He was bringing it up. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm. Bad about what? I asked, playing dumb, though my voice sounded strained even to my own ears. He finally turned to look at me, his gaze serious, open. My hand. On your leg. It was thoughtless of me. I really am sorry, Caleb. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. His words, meant to reassure, somehow made it worse. He saw my discomfort. He thought he'd made me uncomfortable, and he attributed it to thoughtlessness, not anything else. The small flicker of hope I'd harbored began to dim, shrinking into a tiny ember. No, really, Ben, it's fine, I said, trying to inject as much casualness into my voice as possible. Honestly, it's a small tent. We're practically on top of each other. Totally understandable. Happens when you're camping. He studied my face, his eyes searching, assessing. Yeah, he said slowly, as if weighing my words. Yeah, I guess so. Just wanted to make sure we were cool. We're cool, I confirmed, nodding firmly. A small, sad sigh escaped me internally. I had just firmly shut the door on whatever uncertain, beautiful possibility had briefly presented itself. And it was my own doing. But what else could I have done? Confessed to the flutter in my stomach? To the years of quiet longing I'd carefully buried? That would have shattered everything. Our friendship, the comfortable ease we shared, all of it. He smiled then, a genuine, relieved smile. Good. Didn't want to ruin the trip. He reached over and, almost hesitantly, clapped me on the shoulder. You're a good sport, man. The touch was brief, platonic, utterly friendly, and it felt like a cold shower. The warmth from the morning, the intimacy, the spark. It all evaporated, leaving behind a faint ache. We spent another hour at the lookout, munching on snacks, talking about random things, the tension slowly bleeding out of the air. By the time we started our descent, the easy camaraderie we usually shared had largely returned. We joked, we pointed out interesting rock formations, we complained about our tired legs. It was normal, almost. But for me, something had irrevocably shifted. The experience in the tent, the accidental touch, the subsequent conversation, or lack thereof, had opened up a hidden chamber in my heart. A chamber I'd thought was long sealed. It was full of old feelings, desires I'd long suppressed, a yearning for something more with Ben that I'd learned to live without. And now the door was ajar. As we drove back towards the city, the landscape slowly transitioning from wild mountains to rolling hills, then to suburbs, and finally the familiar concrete jungle, a quiet melancholy settled over me. We listened to music, singing along to familiar tunes, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the morning, dissecting every word, every glance, every moment. Was his apology genuine, or was it a way to gauge my reaction? Was his immediate withdrawal a sign of discomfort with me, or discomfort with his own potential feelings? Was his explanation about reaching for his sleeping bag a desperate attempt to create a plausible narrative, or the simple truth? I wanted to ask. I desperately wanted to ask, but the words felt lodged in my throat, tangled with fear and the overwhelming desire to preserve our friendship, no matter the cost to my own heart. We pulled up to Ben's apartment building first. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence in the car was profound. "Thanks for a great weekend, Caleb," he said, turning to me, his smile easy again. "Needed that escape." "Yeah, you too, Ben," I replied, trying to match his light tone. "Always good to get away. Great company, as always." He laughed, a genuine, warm sound. "You know it. Next time, though, maybe we find a spot with a proper bed?" My stomach did a flip. He was joking about the camping, but the phrasing, proper bed, sent a jolt through me. Did he remember the lack of boxers, or was I just projecting? "Only if it comes with room service," I quipped back, hoping my voice didn't betray the sudden rush of heat I felt. He chuckled, then grabbed his duffel bag from the back. He paused at his door, bag slung over his shoulder. "Hey," he said, his voice softer now. "Seriously, though, about this morning. No weirdness, right? We're good?" I looked at him, at his earnest, kind face. He was truly worried. Worried he'd messed up our friendship. He had no idea the real turmoil he'd inadvertently unleashed in me. "Seriously, Ben," I said, meeting his gaze as steadily as I could, putting on my most reassuring smile. "We're absolutely good. Always." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then a genuine, relieved smile spread across his face. "Good," he said again, a deep sigh escaping him. That's all I needed to hear. He waved, then headed into his building. I watched until the door closed behind him, then slowly, carefully, I drove away. The city lights were coming on, painting the sky with a hazy glow. The music on the radio felt distant, irrelevant. My words, "We're absolutely good, always," echoed in my head. They were a lie. I wasn't good. Not really. Something had changed. Something inside me had stirred, woken up, and was now demanding attention, and I had no idea what to do with it. The camping trip was over, but the real adventure, the one unfolding in my heart, had just begun, and the thought of navigating it, with Ben, without him ever knowing, felt like the most challenging hike I'd ever face. The morning after felt less like an awakening and more like a gentle, slow float back to reality. Ben's arm was still loosely draped over my waist, his breathing a steady rhythm against my back. The city outside our apartment window was just beginning to stir, a faint hum replacing the profound silence that had settled in our space during the night. Lying there, nestled against him, felt impossibly right, a sensation I hadn't realized I was longing for until it enveloped me. It was more than just physical comfort. It was a profound sense of peace that radiated from him, seeping into my own restless spirit. I remembered the quiet conversation we'd had last night, long after the initial rush of intimacy had settled. We'd talked about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, dreams we harbored for the future, silly fears, and profound hopes. It was a level of vulnerability I hadn't anticipated, and it had unfolded so naturally, as if we'd been rehearsing these confessions for years, just waiting for the right moment, the right person to share them with. Ben, usually so self-contained, had opened up about his anxieties about his design work, the pressure he felt to always innovate, to constantly be ahead of the curve. And I, typically one to keep my cards close to my chest, found myself sharing my long-held insecurities about my artistic path, the nagging doubt that sometimes crept in, whispering that my passion might not be enough. We'd found common ground in our shared artistic struggles, in the unspoken understanding that came from pouring your soul into creation. As the first slivers of dawn painted the sky in hues of soft gray and pale pink, I carefully shifted, turning to face him. His dark hair was a little mussed, falling across his forehead, and a faint stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked utterly serene, completely at ease, and incredibly handsome. A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling so potent it almost ached. This was new, this depth of connection. It was exhilarating and, honestly, a little terrifying. He stirred then, a soft groan escaping his lips as his eyes fluttered open. They were a stunning hazel, flecked with gold, and in the morning light they seemed to hold all the quiet wonder of the world. A sleepy smile touched his lips as he saw me. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice a little breathless. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the slight rasp of his nascent beard. His skin was warm beneath my touch. He leaned into it, his hand coming up to gently cup the back of my neck, pulling me closer until our foreheads touched. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in ages," I admitted softly, and it was the absolute truth. I'd never felt so rested, so utterly content. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through me. "Me too. No restless dreams, no late-night anxieties, just peace." We lay there for a while longer, just existing in the quiet intimacy of the moment, the unspoken understanding between us thicker than the morning fog. But eventually, the world called. The smell of coffee, brewing in a distant apartment, the faint traffic sounds, the growing light, all conspired to pull us reluctantly from our cocoon. We made breakfast together, a simple affair of eggs and toast. But every touch, every shared glance, was infused with a new significance. It was domestic and comforting, a glimpse into a potential future that felt both exciting and a little overwhelming. I found myself observing him more closely, noticing the way his brow furrowed in concentration as he cracked an egg, the easy grace with which he moved around my small kitchen. It felt like I was seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time. Later that day, as he was getting ready to leave, a wave of nervousness washed over me. What did this all mean? We hadn't explicitly defined anything, and while the night had felt incredibly profound, the stark light of day brought with it a different kind of clarity and a different kind of uncertainty. He sensed my hesitation. He paused at the door, turning to face me, his hands finding mine. His eyes searched mine, open and earnest. "Caleb," he said, his voice gentle, "are you okay?" I took a breath, trying to articulate the tangle of emotions inside me. "I am. It's just... last night was amazing, and I don't want to mess it up." The words felt clumsy, inadequate. He squeezed my hands, a reassuring pressure. "We won't mess it up," he said, his gaze unwavering. "We're just figuring things out, right? We're taking it slow, letting it unfold naturally." "Naturally," I repeated, a small smile playing on my lips. It was a good word. It felt right. He leaned in, kissing me softly, a lingering touch that promised more. "Call me later," he whispered against my lips. "I want to take you out tonight. Dinner. Just us. No camping, no other distractions. Just a proper date." "A proper date?" I echoed, my heart doing a little flip. "I'd like that very much, Ben." After he left, my apartment felt both emptier and fuller. emptier without his physical presence, but fuller with the echoes of our night, the promise of our future. I spent the day in a haze, trying to focus on my art, but my mind kept drifting back to him. The way his hand felt in mine, the scent of his skin, the depth of his eyes. It was a new kind of preoccupation, one that colored every corner of my world. That evening, Ben took me to a small, unassuming Italian place tucked away on a side street. It wasn't fancy, but it had a cozy, intimate atmosphere, with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. We settled into a quiet booth, and as we ordered, the ease between us returned, even stronger than before. We talked about our day, the little things, and then the conversation naturally deepened. "You know," he started, swirling the wine in his glass, "I've been thinking a lot about us and where we're going." He looked up, his gaze meeting mine, earnest and vulnerable. "I really like you, Caleb, more than I've liked anyone in a long time." My chest tightened, a mixture of joy and trepidation. "I like you too, Ben, a lot." It felt like an understatement, but it was the truth. He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile. "Good, because I want to explore this. Whatever this is, I want to see where it goes. But I also need to be upfront about something." He paused, taking a sip of wine, as if gathering his thoughts. "My family, they're pretty traditional. My parents, especially. They have certain expectations. And while they'd never explicitly say anything, I know they've always hoped I'd settle down with a woman, have a family." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of slight discomfort. "It's not that I'm not out to them. I am. But it's always been a sort of don't ask, don't tell situation. They acknowledge it, but they don't talk about it. And definitely not about serious relationships." My heart sank a little, a familiar ache settling in my stomach. I understood that pressure. My own family, while loving, had their own unspoken rules. It was a common hurdle, navigating the expectations of a heteronormative world, even within accepting families. "I get that," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "It's tough, balancing who you are with who they want you to be." He nodded, his eyes clouded with a mix of frustration and resignation. "Exactly. It's not fair to you to drag you into that, and I don't want to hide you, Caleb. Not ever. But it's a reality I'm still figuring out how to deal with." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine, his touch warm and reassuring. "I'm telling you this because I want to be completely honest. I want you to know what you might be getting into. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I'm also not saying it's insurmountable. I don't want there to be any surprises down the line." I looked at his hand, then back into his eyes. His honesty was disarming, a stark contrast to the emotional games I'd sometimes encountered in past relationships. It made me trust him even more. "Thank you for telling me, Ben. Seriously, it means a lot that you're being so open." I took a deep breath. "My family is different. They're super supportive, actually. My mom's always been my biggest cheerleader, no matter who I'm with. But I also carry my own baggage. I've been hurt before, and I tend to build walls. It's hard for me to let people in, truly in." I met his gaze directly. "So if I seem a little hesitant sometimes, or if I pull back, it's not because of you. It's just me trying to navigate this new territory." He squeezed my hand again. "We all have our baggage, Caleb. It's part of what makes us who we are. And I'm willing to help you carry yours if you'll let me." His words were a balm, a quiet promise that resonated deep within me. The rest of the dinner was spent in a more relaxed, but still deeply meaningful, conversation. We talked about how we saw our relationship progressing, about taking it slow, about communication being key. It wasn't a grand declaration of love, but it was something far more solid, an agreement to navigate the complexities together with honesty and empathy. It felt like laying a strong foundation. Over the next few weeks, our relationship settled into a comfortable, yet thrilling rhythm. We spent almost every evening together, whether at my place, cooking dinner and losing ourselves in conversation, or at his, where I got to see more of his creative space. A meticulously organized studio filled with sketches, fabric samples, and design prototypes. I loved watching him work, seeing his passion come alive as he explained his latest project. His enthusiasm was infectious. We went on more dates, exploring local art galleries, stumbling upon hidden cafes, taking long walks in the park, hands clasped together, feeling the easy connection between us deepen with every shared smile, every knowing glance. He met my close friends, and they immediately adored him, praising his kindness and his quick wit. "He's good for you, Caleb," my friend Maya had whispered, giving me a knowing look. "You look lighter." And I did feel lighter. The constant low hum of anxiety that had always been a part of my emotional landscape seemed to dissipate in his presence. He had a way of grounding me, of making me feel seen and understood in a way no one ever had before. But despite the growing intimacy, the shadow of his family's expectations lingered, unspoken but present. He hadn't introduced me to them, and while I understood his reasons, a small part of me still wished for it, yearned for that full acceptance, that full integration into his life. I tried not to dwell on it, reminding myself of our earlier conversation, of the complexities involved. We were taking it slow, after all. One rainy Saturday, we were curled up on my couch, a movie playing softly in the background, though neither of us was really watching it. Ben was idly tracing patterns on my arm, his touch sending shivers through me. "My parents are coming into town next month," he said suddenly, his voice quiet. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This was it. The moment I'd been bracing myself for, and simultaneously trying not to think about. "Oh," I managed, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's nice." He sighed, the sound heavy. "They want to have dinner, the usual family gathering, and they'll probably ask if I'm seeing anyone. They always do." He paused, his fingers stilling on my skin. "I don't know what to tell them, Caleb." My heart ached for him. I knew this wasn't easy. "You don't have to tell them anything you're not ready for, Ben," I said, turning to face him, my hand resting on his cheek. "Your peace of mind is important, and I'm not going to pressure you into anything." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and conflict. "I want to, Caleb. I want to tell them. I want to tell them about you. But I dread the conversation, the silence, the unspoken judgment." He rubbed his temples, a gesture of weariness. "It feels like I'm constantly choosing between being true to myself and keeping the peace with them. And it's exhausting." I pulled him closer, resting my head on his shoulder. "I understand. Truly. It's a lot to carry. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. We can figure this out together." The next few days were charged with an unspoken tension. Ben was more withdrawn, lost in his thoughts, and I gave him space, though it pained me to see him struggling. I wanted to fix it for him, to make it easier, but I knew this was a battle he had to fight within himself. My role was to be there, a steady anchor, a safe harbor. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, he finally broke the silence. "I think I need to do it," he said, looking at me, his gaze resolute. "I can't keep living like this, compartmentalizing my life. It's not fair to me, and it's definitely not fair to you. I want to tell them about us." A wave of relief washed over me, mingled with a touch of fear. It was a big step. "Are you sure, Ben?" I asked, wanting to ensure he wasn't feeling pressured. He nodded slowly. "I am. It's not just for us, Caleb. It's for me. I'm tired of feeling like I have to dim parts of myself to fit into their expectations. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of us. And if they can't accept that, then that's on them, not on us." There was a quiet strength in his voice, a new resolve that made my heart swell with admiration. "I'll be right here," I promised, reaching for his hand, intertwining our fingers. Whatever happens, I'm with you. He leaned in, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a silent promise of solidarity. The dinner with his parents was set for the following Saturday. The week leading up to it was a blur of nervous anticipation. Ben spent hours on the phone with his sister, who, unlike his parents, was fully accepting and incredibly supportive. She offered advice, encouragement, and the promise of backup if things got difficult. He also spent time steeling himself, mentally rehearsing conversations, preparing for reactions. I did my best to distract him, to keep things light when I could, to offer comfort when he needed it. We talked late into the nights, discussing his fears, my own anxieties, and the hope we both held for a future where we didn't have to hide. On the day of the dinner, Ben was a bundle of nerves. He paced my apartment, dressed impeccably, but with a palpable tension radiating from him. "What if they don't get it?" he fretted, running a hand through his hair for the 10th time. "What if they make it awkward? Or worse, what if they just shut down?" I walked over to him, taking his hands in mine, my gaze steady. "Then we deal with it, Ben. Together. You've done the brave thing by deciding to be honest. Whatever their reaction, it's a reflection of them, not of you, and certainly not of us. We are strong. Our relationship is real." I smiled, trying to inject some levity into the tense air. "And besides, you've got your sister on your side, and me. We're a formidable team." He managed a weak smile, a spark of gratitude in his eyes. "You're right. You always are." He took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." I watched him go, a knot of worry in my stomach. It felt strangely like I was sending him into battle alone, and all I could do was wait. I spent the evening cleaning my apartment, trying to channel my nervous energy into productive tasks. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped, but it was never him. The hours dragged by, each one feeling longer than the last. Finally, just past 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Ben. I snatched it up, my voice tight with anxiety. "Ben, how was it? Are you okay?" There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then I heard a shaky sigh. "It was something, Caleb." His voice sounded tired, but there was also an underlying note of relief. "Can you meet me at our spot? The park bench near the river?" "I'm on my way," I said immediately, not even bothering to change out of my sweatpants. I grabbed my jacket and keys, my mind racing with possibilities. The night air was cool and crisp as I walked to the park, the city lights shimmering on the river. The familiar bench where we'd spent so many hours talking, laughing, and just being together was empty, save for Ben. He was sitting hunched forward, his hands clasped between his knees, staring out at the water. I approached quietly, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat down next to him, placing a hand gently on his back. "Ben?" He turned, and in the dim light I could see the exhaustion etched on his face, but also a new kind of peace. His eyes met mine, and there was a tremor in his voice as he began to speak. "It was difficult, Caleb, really difficult. They were cordial at first, asked about work, about my life. And then, my mom, she asked if I was seeing anyone." He took a shaky breath, and I told them. I told them about you, about us. I squeezed his hand, waiting. My dad, he didn't say anything, just looked down at his plate. My mom, she got quiet, really quiet. My sister, bless her, she stepped in, tried to lighten the mood, talked about how happy I seemed, but it was tense. You could feel it in the air, thick and heavy. He paused, rubbing his hand over his face. Then my dad, he just said, "Ben, we just want you to be happy." And my mom echoed it, but it was said in a way that felt more like resignation than genuine acceptance, like they were saying the words, but not feeling them. My heart sank. It wasn't the outright rejection he feared, but it wasn't the warm embrace either. It was the dreaded, lukewarm response, the polite dismissal that cut deeper than anger. "It hurt, Caleb," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "It truly did. To know that even after all these years, after me being out to them, that this part of my life, this important part, is still something they can't fully celebrate. It felt like they were saying, be happy, but don't rub it in our faces. Like I still have to hide the best parts of myself from them. He turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I just wanted them to be proud of me, to be happy for me, for us. My heart broke for him. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, pulling him close, letting him lean into me. Oh, Ben, I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. You deserved so much more than that. I held him, stroking his hair, feeling the tremor in his body. But listen to me. What they think, what they feel, that doesn't change anything about who you are or who we are. It doesn't diminish our connection or our happiness. You did an incredibly brave thing tonight. You stood up for yourself. You stood up for us. And I am so incredibly proud of you. He sniffled, burying his face in my shoulder. I know, he mumbled, his voice muffled. It's hard. It really is. To feel like you're constantly fighting for validation from the people who are supposed to give it to you unconditionally. It is, I agreed, my own eyes stinging. It's unfair, and it's exhausting. But you're not alone in this, Ben. You have me, you have your sister, and we love you unconditionally. Remember that. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other, the quiet understanding between us a balm to his wounded spirit. The world felt a little sharper, a little harsher, having just faced a difficult truth. But in that moment, in the warmth of our embrace, a new kind of strength was forged. It wasn't the strength of easy acceptance, but the resilience born from shared struggle. Eventually, he pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked at me, a soft, grateful smile touching his lips. Thank you, Caleb, for just being here, for everything. Always, I whispered, my thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Always. We walked back to my apartment, hand in hand, the earlier tension having given way to a quiet determination. The air was still cool, but the earlier heaviness had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm resolve. Once inside, we didn't speak much, just moved around each other with a new, profound understanding. There was a raw vulnerability in Ben's eyes that made me want to shield him from the world, and simultaneously, a quiet strength that made me admire him even more. We ended up on the couch again, not watching a movie this time, but just simply being. He rested his head on my chest, listening to the steady beat of my heart, and I ran my fingers through his hair, a silent gesture of comfort and unwavering support. It wasn't the romantic fairy tale ending you read about in books, the immediate acceptance, the joyous celebration. But it was real, it was messy, and it was hard, and it was deeply human. And in its own way, it felt more profound than any easy acceptance could have been. As he drifted off to sleep in my arms, I lay awake for a while, gazing at the ceiling. The camping trip felt like a lifetime ago, the accidental hand on my leg a distant memory. We had moved so far from that initial spark, through hesitant glances, shared smiles, quiet confessions, and now through a difficult confrontation with reality. This was deeper waters indeed, and as challenging as it was, I knew with an unwavering certainty that I was ready to navigate them, hand in hand with Ben, no matter what storms lay ahead. My heart, once guarded, now felt fully open, vulnerable, and utterly, irrevocably committed. This was love, in its truest, most complicated, and most beautiful form, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I kissed the top of his head, a silent promise. We had a path to forge, and it wouldn't always be smooth, but we would walk it together. That much I knew. And for now, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The silence that had settled between Liam and me after our last conversation wasn't the comfortable kind we'd found by the campfire. This was a heavy, suffocating quiet, filled with the ghosts of unspoken fears and doubts that had suddenly materialized, like mist rolling in to obscure a familiar path. I'd walked away from his place that night with a knot in my stomach, replaying his words. I just. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Caleb. All of it. And my own inadequate response, a mumbled, okay. That felt like a betrayal of everything I was feeling. For days, a dull ache had taken up residence in my chest. My apartment felt too big, too empty. My usual routines offered no solace. I'd catch myself staring blankly at my laptop screen, a half-written email suspended in limbo, my mind instead drifting to the curve of his smile, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the warmth of his hand on my leg that first morning. It was agonizing. This push and pull, this feeling of having found something precious only to have it slip through my fingers. I wanted to reach out, to call, to text, but a stubborn pride mixed with a very real terror of pushing him further away held me captive. Then, a week later, a single text message popped up on my phone, making my heart leap and then clench. Can we talk? Really talk? I'm at the coffee shop we went to after the hike, if you're free. It wasn't an apology nor an explanation, but it was an invitation. And despite the lingering sting of his uncertainty, despite the fear that he might be calling things off for good, I knew I had to go. I needed to understand, even if it meant hearing the worst. I needed to see him. The coffee shop was bustling, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and hushed conversations. He was sitting at our usual corner table, a half-empty mug in front of him, his gaze fixed on the street outside. His usually vibrant energy seemed muted, his shoulders a little slumped. When he looked up and saw me, a flicker of something, relief, apprehension, crossed his face. He offered a small, hesitant smile. "Caleb," he said, his voice a little rough, "thanks for coming." I slid into the opposite chair, my heart thrumming against my ribs. Of course. The silence stretched, heavy again, until he took a deep breath, like someone about to dive into cold water. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, stirring his coffee with a spoon, though I doubted he was actually drinking it. Since that night. He still hadn't looked me fully in the eye, his gaze flitting to the table, to the window, anywhere but my face. What I said. It wasn't fair to you. Or to us. I waited, my breath held. This was it. The moment of truth. He finally met my gaze, and I saw a vulnerability there, a raw honesty that softened the sharp edges of my anxiety. I pulled back, Caleb, because I was scared, genuinely terrified. What we were building, it felt so real, so fast. And I haven't felt that in, well, a very long time. He paused, searching for the right words. My last relationship, it ended badly. It wasn't just the breakup. It was the way it made me question everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about commitment. I built up these walls, told myself it was safer to keep things light, to never let anyone in too deep. My own past echoed his words. I understood that fear of intimacy, that self-preservation instinct that often disguised itself as indifference. I get it, Liam, I said, my voice softer than I expected. We all have baggage, things we carry. He nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. It's more than just baggage, Caleb. It's a blueprint. My ex, Mark, he was incredibly charismatic, fun, made me feel on top of the world. But he was also incredibly insecure, and that insecurity manifested as control, then manipulation. By the end, I felt like a shadow of myself, like I didn't know who I was without his approval. When he left, it was devastating, but also liberating. And I swore to myself I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me again, never let myself be that vulnerable. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice dropping. And then you came along, and everything I'd carefully constructed, all those defenses, started to crumble. The camping trip, the way you just saw me, the ease we found. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying. When I woke up that morning and my hand was, well, it wasn't intentional, not consciously, but it felt so right, so natural. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant I was letting my guard down, allowing myself to feel something so profound, so quickly. I was afraid of getting hurt again, Caleb, afraid of losing myself again. A wave of understanding washed over me, displacing the lingering hurt. It wasn't about me. It was about him, his past, his wounds. And for the first time, I saw his uncertainty not as a rejection, but as a testament to the depth of what we had found. It was big enough to scare him. Liam, I began, reaching across the table and gently taking his hand, his fingers cool against mine. He didn't pull away. Thank you for telling me. Really. That takes courage. I squeezed his hand. I've got my own history too, not as dramatic perhaps, but I've learned to be cautious, to protect my heart. But with you? I trailed off, searching for the right words. With you, it felt different from the start, like finding a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing. And yeah, that's scary. That kind of connection, that kind of vulnerability, it's a risk. But it's a risk I'm willing to take. Because I believe in what we have. I believe in us. He looked at our joined hands, then back at my eyes, and a profound sadness mixed with something akin to hope settled on his face. I want to believe in it, Caleb, more than anything. But I keep second-guessing myself. Is this real? Am I rushing into something? Am I just projecting onto you what I want to see? That's normal, I reassured him, tightening my grip. Those are natural fears when you've been through what you have. But here's what I know. I'm not Mark, and you're not the person you were back then. We're both different now. And what we have, this connection, it's not built on insecurity or manipulation. It's built on respect, on shared laughter, on honesty, and on that undeniable spark that just exists between us. I could see the gears turning in his mind, wrestling with his internal demons. So what now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile this time. Now we take it slow. We don't rush. We keep talking. We learn about each other's fears and dreams, about our pasts and our hopes for the future. We build trust, brick by brick, and we lean into this, Liam. We don't run from it. We give it a real chance. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of my hand. The cacophony of the coffee shop faded into the background. It was just us, in this little bubble of shared vulnerability. Finally, he exhaled, a long, shaky breath that seemed to release some of the tension he'd been carrying. Okay, he said, the single word loaded with meaning. Okay, Caleb, I want to. I really do. That okay was more than just an agreement. It was a promise, a willingness to try, a choice to step out of the shadows of his past and walk towards a shared future, even if that path was still a little hazy. We spent the next hour just talking, really talking, without the pressure of needing to define anything immediately. We revisited the camping trip, laughing about my lack of packing skills and his surprisingly good campfire stories. We talked about our favorite books, our childhood memories, our aspirations. It felt like rebuilding a bridge, carefully laying down each plank, making sure it was sturdy. The conversation didn't magically erase his past hurts, nor did it instantly dissolve my own anxieties. But it established a new foundation, one of open communication, of empathy, and of a shared commitment to navigating the complexities together. When he finally had to leave for work, he squeezed my hand, a genuine smile gracing his lips this time. Thanks, Caleb. Really. This helped. Any time, I said, my heart lighter than it had been in days. Any time at all. We started seeing each other again, but with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding. Our dates weren't just about having fun, they were also about exploration. We cooked together, sharing recipes and stories from our families. We went on long walks in the park, dissecting movies, debating trivialities, and occasionally diving back into the deeper conversations about our fears and hopes. Each interaction was a layer, slowly but surely stripping away the lingering walls that both of us, in our own ways, had built. One evening, we were curled up on my sofa, watching a documentary about stargazing. The lights were low, the only illumination coming from the TV screen and the soft glow of my standing lamp. I felt his head rest on my shoulder, his breathing even and relaxed. The easy intimacy of the moment was a stark contrast to the earlier uncertainty. "Remember that night on the camping trip?" he murmured, his voice sleepy. "Looking up at all those stars?" "How could I forget?" I smiled, recalling the awe, the quiet connection we'd felt under the vast expanse of the night sky. And "I felt so small," he continued, "but also so connected. Like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone, not even a little bit." I shifted slightly, wrapping my arm around him, pulling him closer. "You're not alone, Liam. Not anymore." He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned his head, his chin resting on my shoulder, so he could look at me. His eyes, usually so bright and lively, were soft, reflective. "I really thought I'd screwed things up," he confessed, his voice tinged with lingering regret. "When I pulled away, when I said those things, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I cared so much it overwhelmed me. It was like all those old anxieties, all those old wounds just flared up at once. It's hard to unlearn patterns of protection, you know?" "I do," I assured him. "It takes time, and it takes courage to even acknowledge them, let alone try to change them." "You've been incredibly patient with me, Caleb," he said, his thumb gently stroking my arm. "More patient than I deserve." "Don't say that," I responded, a warmth spreading through me. "You deserve understanding, just like anyone. We all deserve a chance to work through our stuff. And I wouldn't trade these conversations, these moments, for anything. They've only made us stronger, I think." He leaned in, his lips brushing my temple, a soft, tender gesture that sent shivers down my spine. "You really think so?" "I know so," I whispered, turning my head to meet his gaze. Our eyes locked, and in that shared glance I saw not just affection, but a deep, unwavering trust that had been painstakingly built. This isn't easy for either of us, building something real, but that's why it matters so much, because we're choosing it every day, choosing each other. He smiled, a slow, radiant smile that reached his eyes and made my heart swell. "You're right, and I'm choosing you, Caleb, more than you know." The next few months were a quiet blossoming. We celebrated small victories, like the first time Liam spontaneously shared a deeply personal childhood memory without prompting, or the evening I found myself opening up about a long-held fear of commitment I hadn't even realized I possessed until then. We continued to spend weekends out in nature, sometimes hiking, sometimes just sitting by a river, simply being. Our connection to the outdoors, born during that pivotal camping trip, became a grounding force in our relationship, a reminder of the raw, simple beauty of discovery. One crisp autumn afternoon, we decided to revisit the very spot where we'd camped. The leaves were a riot of fiery reds and oranges, painting the landscape in hues that mirrored the warmth that had grown between us. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. We hiked the same trail, pointing out landmarks, sharing anecdotes about our first time there. When we reached the clearing where we'd pitched our tent, a sense of nostalgia washed over us. The fallen leaves covered the ground where our tent had been, but the memory was vivid, almost tangible. I remembered the apprehension, the excitement, the quiet intimacy of that first night, and, of course, the morning. "It feels like a lifetime ago," Liam mused, kicking at a pile of leaves, "and yesterday, all at once." I wrapped an arm around his waist, pulling him close. It was the beginning of everything, wasn't it? He leaned his head against mine, sighing contentedly. It really was. That morning, finding your hand on my leg, it changed everything. It forced me to confront a lot of things I'd been avoiding. He paused, then chuckled softly. Though, for a while, I wasn't sure if it was a good change or a catastrophic one. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of genuine joy. Believe me, I had a similar internal monologue. We stood there for a while, just soaking in the atmosphere, the quiet understanding passing between us. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the clearing in a golden glow. It was breathtaking. Caleb, Liam said, his voice softer now, more serious. He turned to face me, taking both my hands in his. His eyes searched mine, earnest and full of a love that was now undeniable, unburdened by fear. I love you. The words, though anticipated, hit me with the force of a tidal wave. They weren't a question, or a tentative exploration. They were a declaration, firm and resonant, spoken from a place of complete certainty. My own heart, which had been so careful, so guarded for so long, felt like it was finally, truly, fully open. A tear pricked the corner of my eye, a tear of overwhelming happiness and profound relief. I love you too, Liam, I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion. So much. He pulled me into a fierce hug, holding me tightly as if he never wanted to let go. And in his embrace, under the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the vibrant tapestry of autumn leaves, I felt a sense of belonging I had never quite experienced before. It wasn't just physical warmth, it was a soul-deep recognition, a feeling of finally being home. We stayed there until the last sliver of sunlight vanished, holding each other, whispering promises and dreams into the deepening twilight. The cold didn't bother us. Our love was a warmth that permeated everything. The next significant step came naturally, organically. We talked about moving in together. It wasn't a rushed decision, but a slow, careful consideration of what it would mean for our individual spaces, our routines, and most importantly, our relationship. Liam, still mindful of his past, initially expressed reservations about merging lives too quickly, but we approached it with the same open communication that had become our bedrock. We made lists, discussed compromises, and even spent a weekend just trying to organize our combined belongings in my apartment as a test run. It was chaotic, messy, and filled with a lot of laughter. We discovered our quirks, our pet peeves, and our surprisingly complementary strengths. He was meticulously organized. I was more of a creative chaos type. He was an early riser. I was a night owl. But instead of being sources of conflict, these differences became opportunities for playful negotiation and mutual understanding. One evening, after meticulously sorting through boxes of books and debating the merits of various shelving units, we found ourselves exhausted but content, sharing a pizza on the floor of my living room. You know, Liam said, chewing thoughtfully, I used to think that sharing a life meant losing parts of yourself, like you had to conform to become one half of a whole. He gestured around the room, which was now a blend of both our styles. But this feels different. It feels like we're making space for each other to be fully ourselves, but also creating something new, something ours. I smiled, a profound sense of peace settling over me. That's exactly it. It's not about losing. It's about growing, expanding, and having someone to share it all with. It's still a little scary, to be honest, he confessed, his eyes meeting mine. This level of commitment, this much exposure. It would be strange if it wasn't, I agreed, taking his hand. But we're in this together, and whatever comes our way, we'll face it as a team, always. He squeezed my hand, his gaze unwavering. Always. A few weeks later, we officially started the process. Boxes filled with Liam's belongings began to populate my apartment, slowly transforming it from Caleb's place into our home. We painted walls, rearranged furniture, and made countless trips to hardware stores, each task a small act of co-creation, building not just a living space, but a shared life. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still moments of frustration, of miscommunication, of old insecurities rearing their heads, but now we had the tools to navigate them. We had trust, honesty, and a deeply ingrained commitment to understanding each other. The ghost of Liam's past relationship still occasionally cast a shadow, but now, instead of letting it define him or our dynamic, he acknowledged it, talked about it, and allowed me to help him dispel its power. And in return, I found myself sharing vulnerabilities I hadn't known I possessed, allowing him to see and accept all the messy, imperfect parts of me. Our future stretched before us, an open road. We talked about adopting a dog, about future camping trips, about traveling to places we'd always dreamed of seeing. We planned quiet evenings at home, loud gatherings with friends, and everything in between. It wasn't about erasing the individual paths we had walked, but about weaving them together into a stronger, more beautiful tapestry. One morning, months after Liam had moved in, I woke up before him. The sun streamed through the bedroom window, painting stripes across the duvet. He was curled up beside me, his arm draped across my waist, his face peaceful in sleep. I lay there for a long moment, just watching him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The memory of that first morning, his hand on my leg, the shock, the confusion, the exhilarating possibility, felt like a distant echo. So much had changed since then. We had changed. I gently reached out, running my fingers through his hair. He stirred, a soft groan escaping his lips, and then his eyes fluttered open, meeting mine. A sleepy smile spread across his face, instantly brightening the room. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice filled with a tenderness that still surprised me sometimes. He snuggled closer, burying his face in my neck, his arm tightening around me. "Still sleeping without boxers?" he teased, his breath warm against my skin. I laughed softly, a joyful, unburdened sound. "Some habits die hard." He lifted his head, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Good to know, for future reference." Then he leaned in, his lips finding mine for a slow, lingering kiss that spoke volumes. It was a kiss of shared history, of enduring love, of an unshakable future. Lying there, entangled in the warmth of our embrace, with the morning sun illuminating our shared space, I understood then that love wasn't about finding perfection. It was about finding someone whose imperfections you could cherish, whose fears you could soothe, and whose hand, even in the most unexpected of circumstances, felt like it was exactly where it belonged. Our horizon was no longer a distant, undefined line. It was a vibrant, ever-expanding landscape that we were building, together, one sunrise at a time. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.